afternoon. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today. My name is Hilton Root, and I'm a professor of public policy at George University in Virginia. So the topic today is the startup system, making entrepreneurial systems flourish. So an important part of this system is this nexus between the governance structures of firms and the social forces and financial intermediation, which I will talk about, which has a lot to do with the availability of information. And so this kind of crystallizes around the subject of trust, civil society, and laws. Often this is easy to overlook. But we can trace this combination in particular when we look at one of the best known examples of a creative society or a creative ecology, very well studied in a place where I happen to have spent 10 years of my life, Silicon Valley. So it's a very good illustration of the link between social institutions that foster trust and technological progress, and I will try to illustrate why I believe this is so. So if we look at the history of innovation in the U.S. case, of course, if you go back to the 19th century, it's all about corporations, large corporations that were vertically integrated, and they had unique assets, meaning they had assets that they possessed that nobody else possessed, and they managed these assets through a command and control hierarchy. And and this system has been well explained by economists. It internalized many of the risks of transacting across markets, so it has a lot to do with the problem of trust. It allows the capture of benefits of scale economies, and it allows for the establishment of market control. So actually, if we look at the United States today, this system is relatively unimportant as compared to the new, what you are calling today, creative economy system. So Silicon Valley is a very good example of this, as I mentioned. Increasingly, we call it a strategic ecology. And aspects of this that are particularly important are the diffuse production networks, so it's not concentrated like the traditional firms were in a single industry, in a single firm, and the interconnectedness of this ecology spans an entire industry, and of course this is the industry that we associate with high technology. So there is an openness. It's sometimes called an open system as compared to the closed systems of the past, and it promotes learning and knowledge among specialist workers that are in related technologies, and they both compete and they cooperate at the same time. And the most important aspect of this, of course, is that it's a learning environment. They learn from each other, both through competing with each other and cooperating with each other. And in the process, the staff moves about relentlessly. In other words, there's constant mobility of people from one firm to another, although the Valley is increasingly trying to, as you may have read, prevent this from happening. But this is a characteristic of the software industry in general and of technology in general. So what we've seen is that firms exchange managers, owners, and creditors just as easily as they exchange labor and parts, and this allows competitors to be highly informed about the activities of rival firms. And of course, this process is increasingly occurring at a national and international scale. So why did this happen, this open industry become so predominant? Well, because project completion, and that's a very important aspect of high technology, can be faster in a small startup company than in a large established firm. And in many cases, the ideas may have originated in established firms, but the established firms could not activate or operationalize the idea as quickly as these smaller companies could. This meant that there was a great deal of decentralization in operations, and companies that wanted to succeed in technology, even the very large ones and traditional ones like IBM, actually had to break themselves down into a decentralized unit. So in a sense, they actually try to imitate through the decentralization the structure that had become the open structure of Silicon Valley. The phrase that people most often hear is, I work for the Valley. I do not work for any particular firm. And that's, of course, extremely different from the traditional structure of U.S. Technology development. So the high-valued activities require high information, and the high information has to jump over the walls of corporations and of ethnicity, clans, classes, races, and nations. And the reason I bring up these factors, these are social factors, is that there was what is known as very weak social capital in Silicon Valley. There were weak ties between the individuals, meaning that they didn't have a great deal of familiarity or close contact with each other, as was true in some of the cities that failed at technology initially, like Boston and the cities in the East Coast. So how did Silicon Valley capitalize on these weak social ties? This is something that's extremely important to the characteristics of a creative ecology. The weak social ties can drive innovation by providing novel connections that would not be apparent to people who are familiar, who interact mostly with people like themselves. It brings up diverse perspectives, and in some cases, ethnicity is a factor here, but so is the characteristic of people coming from very different backgrounds as far as their education is concerned. So unrelated industries and remote analytical disciplines, sometimes disciplines as remote as ancient languages, actually had a very important impact and input into the software industry because they challenge the certainties that people often have if they only operate within a single discipline. Another very important aspect of Silicon Valley is that Silicon Valley firms, for the most part, receive no special treatment from government. And they spend very little time pursuing licenses, subsidies, and permits. And there are a lot of stories that illustrate this. I don't have time for it to tell you some of them. I'm happy to do so if there's time for Q&A later. So the challenge for the Valley and for software development in general and for knowledge industries more broadly, is that many of the products and much of the capital is intangible. Now the real challenge is to make intangible capital bankable. So why is it not initially obviously bankable? Because the Valley's enterprises don't have collateral in the form of fixed assets, in the form of bricks and mortar, in the form of plants and equipment. So for investors, often what they're looking at are the buying and selling of patents, things that have no obvious or confirmed value. So one of the most important challenges that investors face is how to protect themselves from downside risks in early stages of project development when there's no lien on assets. And this is absolutely critical in understanding, I think, the creative economy. And I'll summarize that first, the Valley's firms do not receive and have not received government patronage. In fact, when they have received it, it's usually meant the end of the company rather than the beginning. They don't use vertical integration as a means to overcome market uncertainties. So the question is, this raises many issues that traditional productivity didn't raise in terms of the funding model. So let me say a few things about what I know about South Korea. I know very little, but my initial observation has been that there's a missing middle stage, and this is what I want to concentrate on. South Korea has obviously extremely gifted young people who have extraordinary training in engineering and often are very willing to risk everything they have to start companies. But where South Korea has been weak, and all developing, or let's say most emerging economies have this weakness, is, well, let me say, where Korea is strong is the existence of institutional investors with abundant funds. Where but the problem, the weakness is what I call the middle stage. This is actually the stage where venture capital and venture capitalists have filled in the software, well, in the knowledge economy in the U.S. Creating a marketable product, especially in areas that are increasingly important in the knowledge economy, like bio industries, requires skills and difficulties both in marketing and in meeting the various patents, and in dealing, understanding demand factors in the economy. These are things that the founders, the people who have the creative experience and knowledge, they won't have much experience in this. In fact, they'll often significantly underestimate the complexity of actually bringing a product to the market. So this middle stage of enterprise development in the U.S. and is often filled, but not always, by venture capitalists. So venture capitalists are essentially people who manage funds, usually not their own funds, and this is absolutely critical to understand. It's often the funds of institutional investors, and it's often funds of people who have no intrinsic knowledge of the industry that they're investing in. So what does the venture capitalist bring is knowledge about how to create a company and how to commercialize a product. So the investors themselves don't have this knowledge, and the innovators don't have this knowledge, and there's no reason why we should expect them to. So what do? They pick opportunities for growth based on their experiences, and also based increasingly, well, on their ability to recognize the value of a product at an early stage in its development. And this is a very problematic aspect of venture capital. So it's value-added investment, and it's value, and so the question is determining when a company is actually a good bet. And to do this, they often have several challenges. The first challenge they have is founder egotism. Often the founder of the company, and if the founder is allowed to stay in control of the company through its stage of development, that can be problematic. And actually 80% of all companies that have had IPOs have replaced the founder in order to reach the IPO stage. The question is why? Well, the reason is that future investors, in other words, the public itself, wants to be sure that the governance structure of the company will constrain the egotism of the founder. Now, I've been to countries all over the world, at least 20 different countries, where I've talked to government officials about the challenge of dealing with entrepreneurial startups. And number one on their list is always what they call founder egotism. So this is not just a U.S. thing. This exists in Malaysia, this exists in India, this exists in Israel, this exists in Ireland, this exists wherever there has been a startup culture. So the venture capitalist has to ensure professional management of the firm before it can sell the firm or go into the IPO stage. So what we're really talking about is infrastructure for equity investing, and the reason I mention equity investing is that most of the knowledge-based industries, when they go from the venture to the actual operational stage through an IPO, the key is the ability of the initial investors to exit the investment through an IPO, and by making it public. So we're talking about financing experiments, and this is the limitation of venture investment, is that venture capitalists will usually start with a lot of different projects, and they will eventually winnow them down, and they do this at a very early stage. they want to avoid expensive mistakes. Now, this is the advantage of venture, and this is why you would want venture people to be at the early stage of the process. But there is a limit, and we've increasingly discovered that this limit is that society's largest problems, the biggest long-term problems, are often problems where we don't have any benchmarks at early stages, or where the sectors themselves require very high costs to get the learning process up. So in these areas, venture capital is not very important. Eventually, contrary in fact to what people in Silicon Valley tend to believe, Silicon Valley has an enormous debt to pay to the larger society, a debt they're often not willing to acknowledge, and a lot of that debt has to do with the institutions, the social and public institutions that protect investment from both private and governmental malfeasance, and just the simple difficulty that government has because of the fact that government-based projects have constituents, and these constituents are often very difficult to get off the project if it's not working out very well, whereas the venture person, the private capitalist will cut and when it looks like the project's not going in the right direction. So in a sense, institutions are the social incubators. They allow the process of innovation to occur, and so there are a few things that we need to know. One, the psychology of if we build it, they will come, and China has tried this quite a bit, has been very unrealistic, and the reason is they won't come unless the trust is there created by laws, social forces, the necessary internal governance structures, and of course the financial and information intermediaries, as well as regulators. All these are critical to the process. The most important challenge for overcoming poverty in the 21st century will be taking abstract ideas and making them into actual commercialized products. So my conclusion is the following. The main challenge that developing countries will face is not the technological skills. These are easy to transfer through education. The more difficult skills or capabilities are legal and financial infrastructure. Second, it's very important to create an environment in which the private sector and the public together, public investment is absolutely critical of private investment, that they will be able to make bets on the future based on their understanding that they can appropriate the benefits of their investments. Third, these institutional bridges between ideas and money are what turn dreams into products that the market demands. There's no shortage of dreamers in the world who imagine a better future both for themselves, for their families, and for their country. But what they need are the institutional bridges between ideas and money to turn their dreams into products demanded by the market. Thank you.